So this is the Adidas F50 Plus, which is probably both the wildest and arguably also one of the most polarizing boots you're gonna see this year. But is it a stroke of genius, or did Adidas just miss a sitter here? Well, in today's video, I'll tell you everything the F50 Plus does really well, and also what it really doesn't do all that well, to hopefully help you decide if you should buy a pair of these or not. Because as always, I'm JayMike, and this is my review of the Adidas F50 Plus. And we might as well start with the elephant in the room. That big, chunky pod of Lightstrike Pro foam in the forefoot, which is sandwiched in between two firm and stiff plates to give you a sprinter starting block-like effect when you push off. Now, with the F50 Plus here, the Adidas football team kinda dipped their toes into the learnings and the research from the Adidas running team. And apart from borrowing the Lightstrike Pro foam here, which has good energy return and is very shock absorbing, the concept was to really give you a very compliant, soft feel when you're pushing off, and then offer two stiffer plates as you start to run faster and basically push through that softer foam to give you a very responsive feel of like the transfer of energy from your foot to the ground. So basically you have the two Lightstrike Pro foam pods here that are kind of sandwiched in between two outsole plates to really give you like a starting block under your forefoot to maximize your energy output and also give you a quick toe-off acceleration. Whew. Lots of science words, eh? And when you put the F50 Plus on and start running, it feels different. Different in the way that it's something I've probably never tried before. So I got this slightly bouncy, almost squishy sensation from the foam, a bit like in the Mercurials, but ever so slightly firmer. But then relatively quickly after, I also started to feel that very, very good stiffness. I mean, the plates are really, really stiff and you can feel that. But unlike on, for instance, the Ultra Carbon, where you get that very hardcore stiffness that directly goes straight into having a very responsive feel, on the F50 Plus here, I feel as if you get that more connected feel as the first output, where you kind of almost like work with, integrate into the foam, and then quickly after, the boot just, snaps into sports mode, where you really feel the plate starting to work with your energy output. So very, very unique. I was a little bit worried, however, about what it would feel like to change direction because of the height of the stack here, and it's a thick boy. But what I found was that because you have two separate pods, if you, for instance, push off to the outside, you only compress that pod, leaving the other one still higher, and that puts the boot in like a good angle to help you push off in that direction. So, it wasn't too bad. But of course, you do also feel that extra bulk. And it's just a big, big change compared to the really flat and low outsole on the regular F50 Elite. And that's just gonna be the trade-off here, where you just feel that your toes are a lot higher off the ground. And I mean, if you miss that raised toe on the X Crazy Fast and the earlier boots, that's cool. But this is just 3 times as wild, really. Now, this also means that in general, I would recommend you to only use the F50 Plus on a good, natural, maybe slightly soft firm ground pitch, so the boot and the foot can kind of sink a little bit into it. And if you, for some reason, insist on wearing this on artificial grass, I normally wouldn't, but if you have to, I would only do so on a modern 4G pitch where there's enough depth and fill in the ground for your boots to sink a bit in. Because if the ground is too flat and firm, the F50 Plus is gonna feel pretty unbalanced from experience. And then there is the upper, which is not where Adidas have put their major focus on the F50 Plus, which, to be fair, is a pretty good decision, because it's still a pretty nice upper. See, here you get this fiber touch upper, just like on the F50 Elite LL, where you have this thin mesh base, then a silicone coating on top, and of course the knitted laceless tongue construction here. And overall, I would say that, I think it fits pretty well. It's relatively nice, feels a little bit anatomical with a slightly wider forefoot and a more snug and streamlined sensation in the midfoot. It is, however, for me at least, still wide enough to fit most foot shapes, but of course, if you have a really wide or really flat foot, it might be a little bit tight. You might get some pressure points in this area, so just keep that in mind. What I also found was that maybe it's because of the raised toe, but it seemed to me as if there was a little bit more height and volume in the toe box compared to the Elite LL. So some people will like that as well.
However, your ability to adjust the fit in the F50 Plus kind of went out the window when Adidas decided to go laceless. So the fit you get is kind of what you get. So I hope you like it because you can't really do anything about it. But I'm gonna get back to that. Now what surprised me though was the lock-in, so what happens in the heel when you start to move. Where for me, it was better than I expected, but also slightly better than in the F50 Elite, because the foam package here is ever so slightly thicker, so it hugs your heel and holds it in place just that little bit more. And because the lockdown in the midfoot, I'm gonna get back to that, but the lock-in in the heel was a nice surprise. Now, as for the sizing, I went with my usual UK 6.5, Europe 40. What I found was I have like a fraction of extra space in the front, but still found that going true to size was the right decision for me. Because while you can go down half a size if you have pretty narrow feet or just like it mega tight, I found that you can also kiss your toenails goodbye if you do so. True to size for me. But as for the touch, the F50 Plus here also have that slightly gritty, matte sprint web micro texture. There's even more of it on the F50 Plus here. And it goes in, I don't think it's too obvious, but it adds a little bit of extra friction on the ball, to the point where, for me at least, it gave me that tiny bit of extra confidence where I felt that there was a little extra something, a little bit of extra, almost like a tool to manipulate the ball when I dribbled. Now, it doesn't really add much in terms of generating swerve when you shoot, so it's not gonna be like Predator or Phantom GX levels of grip. But with that really thin and sharp touch in the upper, having a little bit of extra texture is nice. So from an upper material point of view, I can't complain about the touch.
That, however, is a nice segue to 4 of the things that I can complain about on the F50 Plus. Because as nice as the Lightstrike Pro foam may feel, there is one pretty big drawback for me.
And that is the bulk. As I mentioned earlier, you do feel it. And you also do feel the fact that your toes are just significantly higher off the ground than in a normal pair of football boots. And to me, it just makes the F50 Plus feel less connected and less nimble. And it also affects the touch, because all of a sudden there's a chunk of boot where my brain at least is not used to there being like football boot normally when I touch the ball. And for someone like me who likes, especially a speed boot, to be nimble and streamlined, that's a bit of a turn-off, really. And the other thing is laceless. On a boot that's focused on responsiveness and forward propulsion. I mean, in what world does that make sense, Adidas? Yes, I know that laceless looks cool and is youthful and all that jazz, but when you push off, especially when you have a little bit of foam there that pushes back, your foot is being pushed out into the tongue area. And without laces, there's just less structure and less firmness to hold your foot in place, meaning that you waste energy. And thus, it kind of works against all of the things that Adidas are trying to do with the outsole. You just needed laces. And of course, the lack of laces also affects the lockdown. See, when you have a boot that's focused on aggressive movements, you need something to hold your foot down on the plate and lock it in securely. And when you have a stretchy knitted construction for a tongue, the lack of laces just is far less effective at doing that than if you'd had laces. And you've done it on the F50 Elite. It's just, And finally, I am slightly worried about the durability of the Lightstrike foam and double plate setup here, because there will just be a lot of abrasion and very aggressive pressures around that area when you play football. And after all, it's a running foam. So unless the bonding is like really, really strong, we might see some issues here. Between us, I've seen a little bit of like coming apart on my test boots. It's not criminal, but I'm just a little bit worried.
So to sum it up, the F50 Plus makes a bold move. And while it does do some aspects pretty well, for me, it's just not enough to outweigh the negatives.
See, I actually think that the developers who built the boot have done pretty well to get the best out of what is, for me at least, a fundamentally flawed concept. And Honestly, if you want that bouncy, squishy sensation, there is the Mercurial. If you want the really responsive tooling, there's the Ultra Carbon. And if you want a laceless F50, there is the F50 Elite laceless. And all three boots don't have that extra bulk, and all three boots are cheaper than the 300 euros of the F50 Plus. And I'll be honest, yes, it feels really nice if you only focus on the running, the sprinting part, but honestly, holistically, for me, it's just not really doing it. However, if you can get used to and kind of live with the bulk, it definitely has something unique going. And if you want it, sadly it doesn't come in this box, but if you want it, you can buy a pair from Unisport right over there. Of course, also, you can check out my review of the regular F50 if you want. And of course, tell me what you think of the F50 Plus in the comment section right down below. As well, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new here. And with those words, I'll be signing off. Cheerio.